Okay.
Animation's impact on the entertainment industry has revolutionized how entertainment is produced. When you think of animation, you might think of movies like The Lion King or Tarzan, but animation is also CGI in video games. Now this is cool, but how did we get here? What was the transition between live-action movies to fully animated films, and how did the industry change along the way? It all started in 1908 with the first ever animation called Phantasmagory. Phantasmagory was a film made by Emily Cole. Although the film was concise, Cole made around 700 frames for it. Even though the animation was mediocre, the single project imported a whole new media that opened doors for new creative possibilities around the world. One of the many people that it opened doors for was Walt Disney. Most people assume Disney's first character was Mickey Mouse. However, it was really Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, whose name was Julius at the time, was a character in the animated and live-action Alice's Wonderland. Alice's Wonderland was a series that presented a live-action girl in an animated world. After the lure of Alice's Wonderland eventually died out, Oswald was reused and redone for a short called Charlie Troubles. Eventually, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit once again was redone into Mickey Mouse. Disney worked with Universal Pictures on shorts similar to Charlie Troubles until he found out that the studio was poaching him and his team's work. He left Universal Pictures to pursue ownership of his own work. The majority of people think that Disney himself made Mickey Mouse, but in reality, it was Ub Iwerks, who was arguably Disney's best animator. Also, Disney didn't even name the mouse, it was his wife Lilith. For a while, it seemed that animation was going to stay the same until the year 1927, with the first ever sound synchronized film. A movie called The Jazz Singer was the first film that had synchronized sound. This was a massive turning point for animation across the board. Once seeing this, Disney and Iwerks almost immediately went to work on an animation that incorporated sound. That animation just so happened to be Steamboat Willie. Steamboat Willie was the first ever animation that had synchronized sound. Now, why am I mentioning this? This was one of the many turning points for animation itself and the entertainment industry. Put yourself into the shoes of the people who were watching this or making this. This was awe-striking to them. Finally, the people who were bound to limited forms of media could now let their imagination run free as much as they'd like. It gave them the creative freedom like nothing else could, and it still gives that very same freedom today.
In 1933, Walt Disney Studios invented the first multiplane camera using movable layers of flat artwork in front of a horizontal camera. This was used in the 1937 short film, The Old Mill. This camera added depth and richness to the animation scenes and made everything much better for Disney animations. Some other films that use this technique are Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, and Bambi. This camera became essential for better cartoons in the future. Winsor McCay is an American cartoonist and animator who is known as the father of animation. He was one of the first artists to create animated short films and created the innovative stories that everyone adored. His work has inspired so many illustrators and was unmatched for quite some time. Some well-known films of his are Gertie the Dinosaur and Little Nemo. The first Technicolor cartoon is Flowers and Trees. It is a Walt Disney cartoon whose genre is comedy and musical. Flowers and Trees was released on July 30th, 1932, and its director was Burt Gillett. This film was supposed to be a black and white cartoon, but then, after it was made, it was ordered to change the color. This then led to the 8-minute film being given the 1932 Academy Award for Best Animated Short Subject.
One of the biggest cinematic achievements that animation was able to capture was the idea of animation and live action existing in the same space. Well, how does one even accomplish that idea? What if I said that a movie took this idea and transcended the audience's expectations? That movie was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Utilizing the process of rotographing, the animators were able to draw the characters over the live-action segments of the film. The animators even did 3 layers per animation in order to add a depth effect to the cartoons to make the audience think that they were actually there. The special effects team even made these mechanical contraptions to make it seem like the tunes were actually holding a glass cup, for example. The actors would also practice with rubber dolls to give them an idea of how they should interact with them if they were real. In the end, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a huge success, grossing over $350 million worldwide, becoming the second highest grossing movie in 1988. Over 300 animators worked on this project, specifically Richard Williams, who originally made the sketches for Roger Rabbit and would later go on to spark the start of the Disney Renaissance. Eventually, animation was able to make a splash into the TV world. There are 2 main fields of cartoons that played on television: primetime and Saturday morning cartoons. TV networks wanted to generate revenue and make product sales, so they used cartoons to try and influence the audience. Primetime cartoons were a series of animated shows that played at nighttime because they were cartoons specifically intended for adults. While Saturday morning cartoons were an arrangement of shows that would play specifically for kids on Saturday mornings. These were created since the time frame that children would tune in would be from 10 a.m. to noon and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays. The earliest Saturday morning cartoons were shows like Crusader Rabbit and Mighty Mouse Playhouse. While Crusader Rabbit failed to spark interest in Saturday morning cartoons for other TV networks, Mighty Mouse Playhouse picked up where Crusader Rabbit left off and was able to inspire the network to do animation rather than live action. But one of the biggest events for TV animation was about to happen. William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, two very talented animators, were setting up their very own animation studio titled Hanna-Barbera. They took advantage of the afternoon slots of TV networks and brought some of their A material for them to premiere. Shows like Ruff and Reggie, Jetsons, and The Flintstones were some of the most successful primetime cartoons. The Flintstones was such a hit primetime show that companies like Winston Cigarettes sponsored them, and characters were drawn smoking and endorsing not only that, but Busch beer as well. However, Saturday morning is where animated shows really got to shine. Hanna-Barbera soon transferred over to Saturday morning and brought some of their titles, including new ones, with them. Some of these shows include The Flintstones, Yogi Bear, and Scooby-Doo. Later on, even some comic book characters would land their spot on a Saturday morning TV screen like Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, and of course, Spider-Man. Saturday morning cartoons were a hit with audiences. If you were to ask an adult today what their Saturday morning was like, they'd probably say something along the lines, waking up early, pouring a bowl of cereal, and being glued to the TV for the next couple of hours. Unfortunately, near the 1990s, Saturday morning cartoons just stopped being a thing. The excitement was gone, there would be reruns and sequels for shows you didn't even ask for, and the ritual behind Saturday morning just faded. With the advancement in technology, Saturday morning cartoons just couldn't compete anymore. Personal computers, DVDs or VCRs, and home video game consoles would beat down cartoons altogether. Why have to get up early to watch entertainment when you can just entertain yourself at any time of the day with your new tech? While having a not-so-happy ending, Saturday morning cartoons were still one of the biggest impacts that animation had on the entertainment industry, sparking a new generation of animation and ideas to come from the kids who grew up watching them. While Saturday morning cartoons did die out, there are still some primetime cartoons going on today. The two biggest primetime cartoons still continuing today are The Simpsons, which started in 1989, and Family Guy, which started in 1999.
Speaking of those video game consoles, video games are also considered animation. Here are some games that really revolutionized video games and animation in general. Pong is a well-known arcade game that many people all over the world are familiar with. It was a groundbreaking video game that was released in 1972 by Atari. This was one of the earliest video games and revolutionized the start of video games. It was really a simple game. There are two paddles that you would use to keep a ball bouncing up and down. The more you played, the more difficult it got. This game influenced so many other games to come and compete, such as Pac-Man, Tetris, and even Space Invaders. A couple of years later, one of the most influential video games for the 20th and 21st centuries was released, Mario. In 1985, the game Super Mario Bros. Was released. In Japan, it was originally named Jumpman, for the game mainly being able to control a character named Mario jumping on his enemies to defeat them. This game didn't just end here, however. Throughout the generations, Nintendo came up with various Mario games and is still coming out with them to this day, only with more detail making each game more fun. This also added inspiration to hundreds of other games and revolutionized all video games, such as Legend of Zelda, Mario Kart, Kirby, and Super Smash Bros.
CGI was introduced in 1958 with a movie called Vertigo. Although the CGI was only used for the opening credits, it was still revolutionary. They hired John Whitney, someone who is often credited for being one of the forefathers of animation, and Saul Bass, a graphic designer. Together, they created this sequence of spirals that would appear, disappear, or get bigger and smaller. But what made the CGI? Bass decided that in order to encapsulate the viewer, the drawings themselves needed to be precise, and that's where Whitney came in. Using a rotation of an M5 gun and a pendulum that had a paint reservoir with a pen attached to it, he created the first CGI. While CGI was still being incorporated into modern media, many movies took the opportunity of CGI and used it in their movies. One of these movies was Disney's Renaissance films, Beauty and the Beast. By utilizing computer-generated backgrounds, they blended those with the hand-drawn characters. The scene that this is most evident in is the ballroom scene. This type of animation blend would also impact some of Disney's later projects, such as Aladdin, The Lion King, and Treasure Planet. It's evident that animation has evolved from the strokes of hand-drawn frames to the dynamic fusion of virtual and physical realms. The journey of animation reflects not only technical progress, but also a commitment to pushing creative boundaries. As we look to the future, it's certain that animation will continue to be a pioneering force, shaping the way we tell stories and enchant audiences